It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis, like the one in 2004, are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground. Around 2,500 years ago, an earthquake completely changed the course of one of the largest and most famous rivers on the planet, the Ganges. Now, it's normal for rivers not to sit in one place, so if you live next to one, it could also just disappear without a trace or flood the whole city one day. In the case of the Ganges River, a supermassive earthquake became the reason for this dramatic change. Scientists say it might happen again, and it would be a huge problem for millions of people who depend on this river. The Ganges River starts as small streams in the Himalayas and travels a long way, over 1,500 miles. Along its journey, it meets other big rivers before all the water flows into the Bay of Bengal. The Ganges has the largest delta in the world among all rivers. Just like many other rivers in the region, it slowly changes its path over time. These changes, if they happen when a river wears away its banks, usually takes a long time, sometimes decades. Scientists have discovered that the Ganges-Brahmaputra river system has shifted several times over the last 6,000 years. When they looked at satellite images of the Ganges Delta, they noticed something interesting. There was a crescent-shaped dip in the ground about 28 miles away from where the river is flowing now. This depression was over 1 mile wide and stretched for many miles. They thought it might have been an old main channel of the Ganges River a long time ago. In 2018, the team decided to visit the area to check it out for themselves and take samples to learn more about it. While driving back home, they noticed a pit where someone was digging dirt to create a pond. The next day, they planned to fill it with water, but the researchers spotted something strange in the dirt. There were vertical bands of light-colored sand mixed into the darker mud. These special layers are clues from the past. They show that an ancient earthquake made sand and water shoot up from below the ground and created sand volcanoes that were trapped in time. The scientists studied the sand and mud and figured out that these earthquakes happened around 2,500 years ago and were strong, with magnitudes of 7 to 8. The epicenter was over 110 miles away from the main stem of the river, but it was powerful enough to displace it. It could have affected around 140 million people. The Ganges-Brahmaputra system is close to spots where Earth's tectonic plates meet, so earthquakes happen here often. There's no danger right now, but scientists think that another massive earthquake could happen in the next few hundred or thousand years. It could threaten up to 170 million people. That's about half the population of the U.S. No one can predict exactly when an earthquake will happen or how strong it will be. Learning how earthquakes in the past moved rivers helps scientists figure out patterns and make guesses about similar events in the future. This knowledge could help us prepare better and create safety plans before another big earthquake strikes. Now, the Ganges isn't the only river at risk. The Yellow River, the Irrawaddy River, and rivers in the United States like the Klamath and San Joaquin all face similar dangers. The mighty Mississippi River has also switched its path many times over the last 7,000 years. Right now, there's a huge system of dams and barriers called a control structure in central Louisiana. This structure's job is to stop the Mississippi from spilling over its banks and joining a nearby river. But scientists think that, in theory, these barriers wouldn't handle megafloods. So the Mississippi could break free and change its course again. This would cause massive problems, especially in southern Louisiana. One of the recent examples when a river changing its course caused disaster was the Kosi River in India. In August 2008, over just a few days, the river's path shifted by almost 60 miles, which is a huge change. Floods happen in some parts of the state rather often, but they hadn't seen such strong ones in over 50 years. They affected around 1,000 villages and 3 million people, and about 1 million people had to be evacuated to safety. Since many of these people hadn't faced floods in so long, they weren't ready to handle it quickly. It caused even more damage to their homes and lives. Scientists have been trying for decades to figure out what exactly makes rivers suddenly change their course. A new study explains that two things work together to make a river to do it. This process is called avulsion. First, there's the setup, which is like building up tension before something big happens. Over time, sediment, sand, dirt, and other stuff carried by the river gets deposited in certain places. It either raises the river above the land around it or makes a nearby slope steeper than the river's current path. Then there's the trigger, which is like the final straw that makes everything happen. This trigger could be a big flood, an earthquake, or even something like a pile of logs blocking the water. Now, researchers looked at satellite images of about 170 cases of avulsion from the past 50 years. They noticed these events happen most often near river mouths and near mountains. Rivers were about 3 times more likely to change course in these places than in the areas between them. They also studied 58 river channels in detail, using super clear maps to measure super elevation. That's how high the river is compared to the land around it. They also measured slope advantage. That's how steep a new path might be compared to the river's current one. They found that near mountains, rivers often pile up so much sediment that they become super elevated and spill over. But near river mouths, like in deltas, rivers need a steep slope advantage to break through the mud and form a new path. These two factors work together like a seesaw. If one is stronger, the other doesn't need to be as strong for an avulsion to happen. To figure out where a river might go if it changes course, the researchers created a smart computer algorithm. This tool uses maps to measure the terrain steepness and the river's flow to predict where the river might move. They tested it on 10 past avulsions, and it correctly guessed the path every single time. Scientists hope they could use these findings to protect people living near rivers from sudden floods. Rivers changing course played a big role in creating one of the first organized administration systems in the world. Scientists found clues for this in the territory of ancient Mesopotamia. This name means the land between two rivers, and it was between the rivers Tigris and the Euphrates. People living there relied on these rivers for water, food, and transportation. Scientists wanted to figure out how these sudden changes in these rivers affected ancient people. To do this, they used 2 kinds of maps. The archaeological maps show how ancient cities grew over time, including what types of buildings people built. Certain buildings, like big palaces or city walls, could show when each city first had an organized administration. The second kind of map showed where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed long ago. They often shifted, sometimes slowly, and sometimes very quickly and dramatically. Around the year 5000 BCE, Mesopotamia started to become drier and farming became harder. Farmers had to grow their crops near rivers, where they could use the natural floods to water their fields or dig little channels to bring river water to their plants. Because farming was so important, towns and cities grew near the rivers too, so people could stay close to their food. But when a river suddenly changed its course, people didn't give up. They worked together to dig long canals to bring water from the new river path back to their fields. The canals helped them get water again, and the administration buildings showed they were organizing as a community to solve big problems together. Guaijan Volcano in Indonesia is not your ordinary lava-belching mountain. Instead of producing black smoke and red lava, as most volcanoes do, this eccentric guy lets out a blue flame and electric blue lava. This phenomenon occurs because the volcano contains some of the highest levels of sulfur in the world, and when the sulfuric gases interact with scorching air and get lit by the molten lava, they start to turn blue. Unfortunately, you can see this mesmerizing sight only at night, but you can smell it all day long. By the way, the world's largest acid lake is also located inside this crater. The Dead Sea has a high concentration of salt and minerals compared to other seas, even though it's technically a lake. Swimming is almost impossible, but people go there for the natural chemicals for the body. Floating on the surface is a great way to relax. This ancient body of water got its name because no macroscopic organisms can live there since it's 9.6 times saltier than oceans. Only a few bacteria and fungi can be found enjoying the salt. It's also Earth's lowest elevation on land at 1,400 feet below sea level. An underground crystal cave exists in Mexico, and it looks like some interstellar world. It's roughly 1,000 feet beneath the surface, with each spike measuring up to 35 feet in length and weighing up to 55 tons. These are some of the largest crystals in the world. Luscantire Beach is an endless strand of white sand dunes and azure water. But don't let the tropical vibes fool you. It's located in Scotland. That's why it mostly looks like this during May and June only. In December, the place gets only an average of 1 hour of sunshine per day, making it way more dramatic and monochrome. The Georgia Guidestones is a collection of giant stones in a star pattern. It has inscriptions in 8 languages, including Hindi, Chinese, and Swahili. It also has an astronomical calendar finished in 1980 and was built to last centuries. No one knows who built it or why. All the way over in sunny California is Sequoia National Park, home to the giant forest. It's been around for thousands of years. More than 8,000 of these colossal trees rule the land, including 10 of the largest living plants in the world. The General Sherman sequoia is estimated to be up to 2,700 years old and is recognized as the world's largest known living tree by volume. The famous stone heads of Easter Island have been around for hundreds of years. No one knows exactly why they were built. Some scientists think that local people believed the statues would make the soil more fertile. Soil analysis proved the heads did their job well. It's the best agricultural spot on the island. The chemical composition of the ancient hot springs in Pamukkale, Turkey, makes the water pouring over the edge look magical. They're not only good for cleansing your body, but the mind too. All the way in Saudi Arabia is a rock sliced perfectly in the middle with 2 pieces sitting parallel. What makes Al Nasla so unique is that it wasn't artificially done, but is a result of nature's work over the years. Now, this glacier may look like someone dropped tons of red paint in the middle of Antarctica, but it's actually the natural color. Blood Falls is a result of extreme salted water mixed with iron oxide, giving out this eerie vibe in the middle of nowhere. In early May 2018, New England observed one of the scariest and most dangerous phenomena ever, a super long-track tornado. The frightening natural phenomenon started not far from Charleston, New Hampshire, and traveled toward the town of Webster in Merrimack County. It took the tornado 33 minutes to cover 36 miles and become the 3rd on the list of the longest track tornadoes in New England. In the Philippines, you can swim in some of the most crystal-clear waters and discover an underwater world below you in the province of Palawan. The municipality of Coron has white sandy beaches with many small boats riding through the many amazing sceneries. Tristan da Cunha is a small volcanic archipelago in the Atlantic, with the only neighboring cities of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Cape Town, South Africa. It takes 7 days by ship to get to this unique place. If you want to escape from the rest of the world, staying with the 280 locals will make you feel like you're away from everything. During the first week of January 2018, unusually cold weather in the northeast United States froze the Atlantic Ocean in North Falmouth, Massachusetts. What's more, the ocean was frozen so thoroughly that people were walking on the waves. Now, that's obviously something you don't see every day. Red sand is what makes this beach unique and why tourists flock to Tianjin, China. A red-colored plant called a Sueda salsa dwells in the saltwater. The whole beach is covered in red, with only the top layer of the sea visible. If there ever was a thing that said, "I defy gravity" out loud, it's the stone of Davasco in Argentina. The huge 300-ton boulder stands precariously on the edge of a cliff and rocks a little bit from side to side in the wind. People even checked it by putting glass bottles under one of its edges. They exploded with another movement of the rock. Unfortunately today, you can't see this wonder of nature as it was a century ago. In 1912, the boulder suddenly dropped from its perch, which it had occupied for literally hundreds of years. The people of the nearby town of Tandil were so sad about this event that 95 years later, in 2007, they decided to restore the stone. They made a plastic replica of the rock and put it on the same spot and even in the same position. So, even today, coming by Tandil, you can see its famous balancing boulder. More of a symbol now, of course, because it's no longer rocking and only weighs 9 tons, but instantly recognizable nonetheless. Socotra is an alien-like island off the coast of Yemen in the Indian Ocean, with one of the most unique trees ever seen. It's called the dragon tree, and it can only be found on this amazing island. In 2008, it was labeled as a World Heritage Site. If you ever see a tight burning column of air, don't panic, it's not the end of the world. The creepy combination of whirlwind sounds and scorching inferno means that you have crossed paths with a fire tornado, also known as fire twister or fire whirl. This dangerous phenomenon occurs mostly during wildfires. These fires create a big area of super hot air just above the ground. When this scorching air gets mixed with the cooler air higher up, it results in a whirlwind that churns up burning debris and flames. The most powerful firenadoes can stretch hundreds of feet into the air. The House of Mystery in Gold Hill, Oregon, amazes its visitors with gravity-defying effects. You can't stand straight there, always leaning to the side and having to hold on to something for balance. Balls roll upwards. There's also a broom that stands perfectly still wherever you put it, unlike virtually everything else in the shack. The local Native American tribes called this place the Forbidden Ground, even before the house was built there, and they avoid approaching it. The owners of the shack, though, decided to turn it into an attraction, and they succeeded. They created an atmosphere of mystery around the place, and spread the news about it in newspapers and later on the internet, and voila! A perfect anomaly is made. In fact, it's no more than a curiosity, a human-made optical illusion that tricks your eyes and other senses. Now, if you travel to the Philippines, Indonesia, or Papua New Guinea, you'll have a chance to see some of the most unusual and cheerful trees in the world. The trunk of the rainbow eucalyptus looks as if it had been painted orange, green, red, purple, yellow, brown, blue, hey, you name it. Some trees are so bright that they seem artificial. The rainbow eucalyptus regularly sheds strips of bark, which reveals a bright green layer underneath. A bit later, this green layer gradually changes its color, and since the shedding happens at a different time in different places on the trunk, the tree starts to look multicolored and very attractive. Yemen is home to the oldest skyscrapers in the world and the oldest metropolis. The ancient city of Shabam is considered to be the Manhattan of the desert, due to the collection of mud buildings popping out of the desert floor. It used to be a caravan stop during ancient times. If you've ever been to Yellowstone National Park, you were probably mesmerized by its geysers, which spew superheated water and steam high into the air. But an even more intriguing thing actually hides underground. I'm talking about that underfoot plumbing system that makes those grand eruptions possible. About that, there's good news. Recently, researchers have succeeded in mapping the national park's hydrothermal plumbing system with the help of a giant flying magnet. As a result, scientists have managed to document all these features in stunning detail. The thing is, Yellowstone houses the world's largest hydrothermal system. It contains over 10,000 features, like geysers, mud pots, hot springs, and steam vents. They're fed by a network of underground water pathways. Those get overheated by magma flowing underground. It causes the water to rise to the surface. Now, no one actually knows much about the workings of this system, but the newly created maps might finally shed light on it. Experts explain that their knowledge of Yellowstone has a subsurface gap. That's why it's often called a mystery sandwich. Scientists know quite a lot about the features on the surface because they can observe them directly. And they know what's going on in the magmatic and tectonic system several miles below the surface. But they haven't figured out what's happening in the middle yet. So, I must tell you about that giant flying magnet used for research. It's known as SkyTem. It was attached to a helicopter and flown over Yellowstone several hundred times, scanning the ground below. The magnet is made up of an 82-foot-wide charged wire loop. Its main task is to generate a strong electromagnetic field. And since different kinds of material, like water or rock, respond to this field differently, scientists managed to create a few subsurface maps for the first time ever. The mapping technique also allowed the researchers to differentiate between magma and bedrock, since they have a bit different magnetic properties. And the team got a chance to see how the magma and water interact and create those mind-blowing geological features on the surface. The team got high-resolution maps to a depth of around 500 and 2,300 feet, and low-resolution maps showing what's going on at a depth of up to 1.5 miles. At the same time, the researchers think that the hydrothermal system itself may stretch as far as 3 miles below the surface. If they're right, It means they've only mapped the top half of Yellowstone's plumbing system. Anyway, remember how I said that scientists know pretty much about the bottom part of the Yellowstone sandwich? They have such a good idea about the tectonic plates and deep fault lines because the park's frequent earthquakes provide them with a lot of opportunities to study different phenomena. In July 2021, for example, more than 1,000 earthquakes rocked the area. These days, the team of researchers knows much more about some famous features, like the Old Faithful geyser or the Grand Prismatic Spring. They've also found out that individual hydrothermal features on the surface can actually be connected to others, which can be as far as 6 miles away from them. Another interesting discovery is that even though Yellowstone geysers and hot springs vary in size, shape, color, volatility, and chemical composition, they are mostly fed by very similar underground sources. That means that the difference between the features appears closer to the surface. Now, I'm sure you've seen the iconic image of Yellowstone with a large rainbow-colored spring, fiery orange at its edges. So what makes these hot springs so colorful? Surprisingly, these awesome hues come from microscopic creatures. The temperatures in the springs are so high they can easily and quickly cook you. Plus, the water there is super acidic, like the liquid in a car battery. But there are certain types of heat-loving microbes that don't mind these crazy conditions. You can even say they're thriving there. So every ring of a different color is, in most cases, a ring inhabited by different bacteria. And each species is adapted to a particular temperature or pH level, which measures how acidic this or that environment is. For example, take the Grand Prismatic Spring, yes, the iconic one. Its rainbow hues likely hint at the diversity of microbes living there. So, starting from the center of the hot spring, you can see a beautiful aquamarine color there. That's where the water temperature is the highest, reaching 189 degrees Fahrenheit, because this area is right over the underground water source. The water there is too hot even for microbes. That's why what you see is mostly clear water. As for the reason for its blue color, it's the same as why the sky is blue. Sunlight hits the surface of the water and the light scatters, but the blue light scatters the most, getting reflected back to your eyes. Now, the next ring of color is yellow, all thanks to certain cyanobacteria. The temperature in this yellow ring reaches 165 degrees Fahrenheit. If the conditions in the hot spring were a bit different, these bacteria would create a blue-green hue, thanks to a green pigment called chlorophyll. But since the sunlight hitting the spring is too intense, the bacteria start producing another type of pigment. It's called carotenoids. And guess what? It acts as a sunscreen for the bacteria. And since this pigment is orange, the normally green bacteria get a yellowish hue. And finally, we've got that bright orange color closer to the edges of the prismatic spring. It's a bit cooler there, around 149 degrees Fahrenheit. In this part of the spring, you can find several types of bacteria. They all produce substances that give the spring this bright orange color. And finally, right at the edges of the spring, the temperature is cooler, around 131 degrees, and a greater variety of microbes can survive there. All of them combined give the edges of the spring that red-brown hue. But scientists believe that people and their activity may have influenced the colors of Yellowstone's hydrothermal features. For example, in the past, the temperatures in the Morning Glory pool used to be much higher than they are today. That's why its color was a deep blue. But trash has started to accumulate in the pool, and some of it clogged the vent. This caused the temperatures to drop, which led to microbial growth. As a result, that pretty blue color turned into orange-yellow. As for Yellowstone's geysers, the most famous one is called Old Faithful. It got this name at the end of the 19th century because of how regular its eruptions were. This geyser is more active than the others, erupting about 20 times a day. Each of these magnificent events lasts from 1 to 5 minutes, and the fountain of steaming water can reach a height of 180 feet. Now, while talking about Yellowstone National Park, we can't but mention Yellowstone Supervolcano, right? Supervolcanoes appear when huge volumes of magma are trying to escape from deep underground. Eventually, they burst through Earth's surface. Sometimes all this magma gets stuck, unable to break through the planet's crust. And then, massive pools of pressurized magma gather at a depth of several miles. The pressure keeps growing because more and more magma is trying to get to the surface. At one point, a super eruption goes off. You don't necessarily want to be around for that. Over the past 50 years, the Yellowstone caldera has risen almost 3 feet. It shouldn't alarm you, though. Experts are sure it's a natural behavior for Yellowstone. Periods of dome-shaped uplift are followed by the caldera lowering. Scientists think the supervolcano doesn't present any danger at the moment. For an eruption to happen, the magma inside has to be at least 50% molten. With Yellowstone, this number is just 5 to 15%. Even better, a recent study made the researchers believe the hotspot might be in a state of decline right now, even despite all the breathing and dome-raising activity. There have been at least 3 other super eruptions in the history of Yellowstone volcano. They happened 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 640,000 years ago, long before video. The most recent super eruption was dubbed the Lava Creek eruption. It formed the Yellowstone caldera after spilling out 240 cubic miles of rock, dust, and volcanic ash. No thanks, I'll pass.
Phew, you could finally send that last report for the day and breathe out. The weekend is around the corner. But just when you're about to hit send, you're alarmed by the low rumbling under your desk. Is it the light rail passing by? Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a volcano speaking. What, here? In Arizona? That's right, the ground keeps shifting under Arizona, reminding us that Earth is alive. No panic though. Let's arm ourselves with some context. 20 American states have extinct, active, and dormant, currently sleeping, volcanoes. Among such states, you can find California, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. On the bright side, Arizona's volcanoes are dormant at the moment, but it doesn't mean they won't go off in the near or not so near future. Now, how about traveling to Arizona to check the traces of its active volcanic past? They dot the desert landscapes of this state like spots dot a Dalmatian. There are entire volcanic fields southwest of Phoenix, east of Douglas, near Flagstaff, north of Kingman, and near the Mexico border. The most worrying thing about these fields is that even though they're not active at the moment, eruptions in this region might happen every 1,000 years or so. Well, the time seems to be up. The last powerful and destructive volcanic eruption occurred around 1,000 years ago at the Sunset Crater. Oh, this place is worth paying more attention to. And we will, but a bit later. First, we have to talk about hotspots. No, not that place where you can surf the web. In our volcanic context, a hotspot is a place where insane amounts of heat melt the overlying crust, Earth's thin outer layer, and form volcanoes. This heat rises from the mantle, which is located between our planet's dense, superheated core and the crust. Want to see an example of this type of volcanism? Welcome to the Hawaiian Islands. The Big Island has its active volcanoes because, at the moment, it's situated on top of the Hawaiian hotspot. The older Hawaiian Islands were once there too, but later they drifted off towards the northwest. It happened because that's where the oceanic crust on top of which they sat, namely the Pacific Plate, moved. Now, look at the world's ocean basins. Yes, they're literally dotted with islands that sit on top of hotspots, like Hawaii, Iceland, Samoa, the Galapagos. Those are probably the most famous examples. But don't think that continents can't host hotspots. They can, but those are far less common. One of the most famous continental hotspots is, I bet you know it. Yep, the one beneath the Yellowstone caldera. By the way, the caldera is a vast volcanic crater, especially one formed as a result of a massive eruption that led to the collapse of the mouth of a volcano. The Yellowstone hotspot is basically the creator of Old Faithful and the rest of the hot springs and mud pots for which the national park is famous. Speaking of Old Faithful, let's make a small detour and pay more attention to this wonder of nature. It's one of the most well-known geysers in the world. People have been coming from all over the globe to see it for more than a century. The cool thing about this geyser is that the likes of it can only form under very specific conditions. That's why they're pretty rare. Magma under the surface superheats pockets of underground water. The pressure there keeps growing until it eventually pushes the water upward with immense strength. A certain volcanic rock with a high silica content lines the tunnel through which this water escapes. Basically, it creates a unique pipe that can withstand unbelievable pressure and heat created by the water erupting above the ground. Old Faithful was the very first named geyser in Yellowstone. If you come to visit it expecting the thing to erupt every hour on the hour, you're gonna be disappointed. On average, Old Faithful erupts every 91 minutes or so, which isn't that bad either. Plus, you can download a special app which will provide you with the approximate time of the next eruption. But be very careful while visiting and stay away from the site. The water erupting from the powerful geyser reaches 204 degrees Fahrenheit. The steam is even more scorching, up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot enough to bake a cake. But let's get back to our volcanic hotspots. Scientists still don't clearly understand why there aren't many hotspot volcanoes on continental crust. One reason might be that the continental crust is much thicker than the oceanic crust, which is about 4 times as thick on average. Another reason could be that most of Earth's crust, about 2/3 of it, is oceanic. This means that there's less continental crust for hotspots to form under. Now, I bet those of you living in Arizona will appreciate the following info. We'll talk about a volcanic field right in the heart of this state, the San Francisco Volcanic Field. That's a massive area filled with over 600 volcanoes. Yes, they're mostly small, but it doesn't make them any less impressive. They're scattered across 1,800 square miles in northern Arizona, a giant territory. Interestingly, scientists are still debating about whether this volcanic field is actually sitting on top of a hotspot. But one thing they agree upon, the volcanoes in this area get younger as you move east. And this pattern matches up with the North American plate moving west over what could be a stationary hotspot beneath the surface of our planet. Cool, huh? The volcanic hullabaloo in that area started around 6 million years ago. So, in geological terms, it's relatively young. As for the most recent eruption, it happened less than 1,000 years ago. The Sunset Crater, which I mentioned before, the one near Flagstaff, is the most famous vent from that eruption. The Sinagua people had to leave their homes at Wupatki Pueblo because of the eruption. That site is now part of the Wupatki National Monument. There, you can see how people lived in this volcanic region many years ago. If you go to explore this area, you'll notice that most of the volcanoes there are basalt cinder cones, small and steep. The Colorado Plateau has quite dry weather conditions. That's why the volcanoes haven't worn down much. Some of the best examples of those cones, like this one, called the SP crater, still look like they appeared yesterday. But look around. It's not just cinder cones. The San Francisco Volcanic Field also has a stratovolcano, as well as some lava domes that formed from volcanic rocks with more silica than basalt you can find in places like Hawaii. It means they're thicker and don't flow as easily. Anyway, the stratovolcano is going to be one of the most epic sights you'll come across while exploring this volcanic field. Well, not the stratovolcano itself, but the San Francisco peaks, the remains of that giant formation. They stand tall at more than 12,600 feet. That's 4.5 Burj Khalifas placed on top of one another. It makes the peaks some of the biggest landmarks in northern Arizona. They're not only stunning, but also sacred to the Native American people who have lived in the area for many generations. Now, unlike those super active volcanoes in Hawaii, the San Francisco Volcanic Field takes its time, thousands of years between eruptions. But you shouldn't relax just yet. Geologists say another eruption is likely to happen one day. It will probably occur in the remote eastern part of the field, away from big towns. Phew! And if that next eruption is anything like the one that formed Sunset Crater, it would be quite the show. Lava fountains and rivers of lava flowing. At the same time, the next eruption might not happen for centuries, maybe even millennia. Until then, the San Francisco volcanic field will remain a hidden gem of volcanic history, waiting for its next fiery performance.
Rocks rolling down the slopes of a rumbling volcano, pushing other bigger rocks on their way, and eventually tumbling down into the ocean in a humongous cascade, causing a wave the height of which the world's never seen before. This is what might happen if the Helena slump of the Hawaiian Big Island falls off into the water. The Kilauea volcano is far from dormant. The latest eruption occurred in 2018. Its eruptions are usually accompanied by earthquakes of different magnitudes, and with each quake, the magma rocks on the slopes of the volcano shift down. These rock formations are called slumps, and the Helena slump is the most notorious of them all. In 1868, the shift of this slump caused a tidal wave rising as tall as 60 feet. But what's most troubling is that some 110,000 years ago, a landslide here led to one of the most powerful earthquakes ever, which in turn led to a mega tsunami of over 1,000 feet in height. Scientists are worried that such an event may repeat in the future. If that happens, the wave might engulf the whole of Hawaii and easily reach both North and South American coasts. Geologists are quick to reassure, though, that a landslide like this is unlikely to occur anytime soon. It's just too early for that. But when it finally does, the consequences will be catastrophic. Have a nice day! Yellowstone National Park in the western USA is world famous for its dazzling views, and especially the colorful Grand Prismatic Spring at its very heart. But we should all stay aware that Yellowstone is, first and foremost, an enormous caldera, basically a slumbering supervolcano. The difference between a regular volcano, like Kilauea from earlier, and a supervolcano is that the latter is thousands of times more powerful. Imagine an eruption spewing tons of huge rock and rivers of hot lava, pumping out clouds of ash that make countries stop air travel for weeks. And now multiply all of this by 1,000. This is what a Yellowstone eruption would look like. At first, a huge area in the middle of the national park would shake, crumble, and then blast upwards in a megaton explosion. Lava flows and magma rocks would cover the area of about 40 square miles, roughly half of Washington, D.C. But the greatest danger is the volcanic ash. The ashen plume would rise miles above and get carried by the wind in every direction. Since the eruption would be far from ordinary, the spread and damage would also be much greater than usual. The ash is thick and heavy, so it would cover a vast area in a blanket, destroying crops and even buildings. Worse still, it would spread in the air and block out the sun, leading to a drastic drop in temperature and an artificial winter. Even regular volcanoes can lower temperatures worldwide by a few degrees. A supervolcano may potentially cause a new ice age. Luckily, the chances of Yellowstone supervolcano erupting in the near future, or at all, are extremely low. There have been only 3 of those in the history of Earth, and there's no evidence such a disaster should repeat. Scientists estimate the probability at 0.00014%, which is lower than the chances of an asteroid wiping us all out. Speaking of which, if dinosaurs could talk, and were at least still alive for that matter, they'd tell you that asteroid threat is as real as it gets. Scientists at NASA say they've tracked 90% of all near-Earth asteroids of significant size, and none of them are a matter of any concern. But there are still the other 10% in the great unknown. What's more, asteroids can change their line of flight because of the pull of other celestial bodies and eventually turn our way. Lucky us! Now, if an asteroid big enough, like a mile across, hits the Earth, it will first cause an explosion powerful enough to erase a dozen big cities in a matter of seconds. Then the impact will raise a cloud of dust and debris that will block out the sun, just like the ash cloud from a volcano, and cause a centuries-long winter on the whole planet. But even if it falls into the ocean, which is more likely, a resulting wave will rise several miles high, washing coastal cities off the face of the planet. But at least there won't be a new ice age. Although scientists are pretty sure there's no such threat in the near future, it can't be ruled out completely, and humanity needs at least 5 years to prepare for this event. If a big near-Earth asteroid suddenly changes its course and turns right toward our planet, we won't stand a chance against it. Disaster movie, anyone? A much more probable calamity, though, rests right beneath our feet. It's the San Andreas Fault in California. The fault has been ready for rupture for years now, and scientists estimate that an earthquake along this line is likely to occur in the next 3 decades. And when it happens, it won't be nice. They expect a magnitude of 8.0, which is comparable to some of the most devastating quakes in history. It's all the more dangerous since California is home to some of the most populated cities in the western U.S., including Los Angeles and San Francisco. High-rise buildings are common there, and they're particularly vulnerable against underground shakes. The San Andreas earthquake might cause a whole lot of damage both to cities and countryside. In the worst-case scenario, the ground might break apart, destroying buildings, farms, and changing the landscape altogether. Still, scientists believe that the probability of such a quake is only 7% for the next 30 years. So, there's a rather big chance, 93%, that we'll never see that in our lifetime. Yet, there's another earthquake hazard not so far away from the previous one: the megathrust in Chile. The country sits right above the subduction zone, an area where 2 tectonic plates meet and go one beneath the other. At the place of their meeting, stress has accumulated because of their continuous movement, and once that strain is too much, a major earthquake occurs. Chile has experienced a lot of quakes in the recent years, and scientists are worried those might be preparing the area for a really big one. They believe a great earthquake is due to happen before the end of the century, and it might be devastating to the coastal area. Even smaller quakes caused tsunamis that flooded the west coast, and a huge one like that is likely to raise a wave of incredible height. On the bright side, Chile now knows to prepare in advance for the coming natural disasters, and geologists are pretty sure people will be able to evacuate before the earthquake strikes. In September of 1859, astronomer Richard Carrington was looking at the sun and suddenly saw a bright flare on its surface. He made a note of it in his records, but only realized how important it was a couple of days later. The energy from that flare reached Earth and struck it directly, causing northern lights to appear above Cuba and burning telegraph lines all around the world. This was dubbed the Carrington event, and it was a solar storm. Such storms hit the Earth fairly often, but none of them were so powerful as the Carrington event, neither before nor after. But in 2012, astronomers registered a similar solar flare whose energy nearly hit our planet once again. If it had been just a week earlier, we'd have been in big trouble. Today, humanity relies on electricity in almost every aspect of life, and a powerful solar storm would mess with the electromagnetic field of Earth a lot. All electric appliances would either shut down or short-circuit, and huge transformers powering basically everything would go out of order for good. It would take years to repair them, and the cost of such a massive blackout would count in trillions of dollars. The worst of it is that science is almost unable to predict solar storms, and even if we could know about them in advance, we'd be powerless to stop them. The flare happens in a matter of seconds, and it takes about 8 minutes for the particles to reach the Earth's atmosphere, causing the disturbance. The power outage would come a bit later, in a day or so, when a massive cloud of plasma gets to our planet. At the moment, there's no protection against solar flares, and the chances of one powerful enough to cut all of our electricity in the next few years are quite high, about 12%. The only good thing about all this is that we now know of such a possibility and can at least prepare in advance. Hey, don't forget to pack some underwear and socks. You'll always need those. Imagine standing in the middle of Europe 40,000 years ago. The landscape is rough, cold, and unforgiving. Fast food is scarce, and there's no internet. Suddenly, From out of the woods steps a figure, stocky, strong, and with a face that is quite unusual. This human looks similar to us, but something about them is different. Their brow is heavy, their nose is broad, and their body seems to be built to fight nature itself. Well, congrats! You've just met a Neanderthal. You might have thought that Neanderthals were basically ancient humans, but that's not really true. We come from the same genus called Homo, but we, all modern humans, belong to one same species called Homo sapiens. However, there used to be lots of human species before, and Homo neanderthalensis was just one of them. And they actually were kind of cooler than us. So what in the world has happened to them? Neanderthals lived for a long time, for about 360,000 years, across Europe and parts of Asia. 40,000 years ago, the place we now call southern Italy was sitting on top of a huge disaster, a massive supervolcano called Campi Flegrei. This big boy is huge, about 9 miles wide. That's about 10 to 20 minutes in a car to get across it all. But there were no cars then, remember? At the time, it was quiet for a while, but one day, suddenly, it blew in what became one of the biggest volcanic eruptions Europe had seen in 200,000 years. The catastrophe was so crazy that ash, gases, and debris altered the climate across the entire continent. What comes next is usually called a volcanic winter. Average temperatures drop, the sky gets darker, and life becomes even harsher than it already is. The eruption, known as the Campanian caused Europe to cool by as much as 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't sound like much? Well, the drop of even 1 degree would cause winters to become harsher, causing horrible snowfall, rains, and floods. Crops would struggle to grow, leading to food shortages. The weather would go wild, too, with storms and droughts. Hey, kind of like now. Except multiply this by 7. Events like these caused some huge chaos in modern times. You can imagine what it did to the Neanderthals. But in reality, a simple volcanic eruption shouldn't destroy an entire species, right? Well, yes. The truth is, the Neanderthals were already hanging by a thread back then, and all because of us. They've been in a tough spot for a while. They lived in places that are now parts of Europe, Western Asia, and the Middle East. Modern humans, us Homo sapiens, entered Europe and were giving them some serious competition for food and shelter. Homo sapiens were sneaky dudes, better at finding food, easily adapting to different environments, and using more advanced tools. We were pushing Neanderthals out, trying to get the same resources. We literally made their extinction a slow and very unpleasant process. So, while the volcano definitely made things worse, it wasn't their only problem, and they didn't completely disappear after the eruption. Some of them hung on in isolated places, like Gibraltar, for another 12,000 years. That's because it's likely most of the severe cooling actually happened farther east, away from where the Neanderthals were trying to survive, and it didn't hit their homes as hard as we thought. In fact, the eruption may have even helped them, at least for a while. Some scientists say that the volcanic fallout might have slowed down modern humans' expansion into Neanderthal territory and gave the poor fellas a little more time to survive. So, the Campi Flegrei eruption was a nasty event, but it only delayed the inevitable. Campi Flegrei is a wild card. It's also known as the Fields of Fire. The air itself there is thick with legend. The Greeks and Romans believed this volcano was the gateway to the underworld. Even an ancient Roman poet, Virgil, mentioned this in his famous story, the Aeneid. The hero Aeneas must descend into the underworld, and this place is exactly where he starts. Back in the day, this landscape was full of Roman villas, spas, and fish ponds. The elite had the time of their lives there. What they didn't know, though, was that they were standing on treacherous ground that could go crazy at any moment. The Campi Flegrei is not your typical volcano. You'd imagine a single towering peak, but the landscape looks deceivingly calm, with small features popping up here and there. But if you flew above it, the sight would be insane. A gigantic circular basin, peppered with volcanic cones and craters, like scars from the Earth's violent past. The danger here lies in its subtlety. The ground beneath your feet is constantly shifting, even when you don't notice it. Every so often, the land rises, only to sink again, sometimes by several feet, as magma or gas moves beneath the surface. It's incredibly creepy. The risk is almost invisible. The Campi Flegrei is a massive depression formed by two colossal volcanic eruptions. One of them was the one that cooked Neanderthals, and another happened 15,000 years ago. The most famous eruption, though, happened in the 16th century, and it was horrifying. The year was 1538. For years, the people of Paswali had noticed something unsettling. Land that once sat below the waves was slowly rising. What was once the sea had become new ground. Rumblings from deep within the earth were terrifying, but had become a normal part of life. Earthquakes started in the early 1530s, small at first, but in just 8 years, they became the norm. Until one day, on September 28th, horrifying tremors shook the ground. By the next evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a massive crack ripped open the earth near the ancient Roman town of Supervolcano. From this gash spewed fire, smoke, and a rain of volcanic ash miles away. It was thick and muddy, likely mixed with underground water. The ground trembled as hot pumice rock was thrown high into the air. And then a new mountain began to rise from the land. This was the birth of what we now call Monte Nuovo. Eventually, things seemed to calm down, as if the earth was catching its breath. For days, things seemed quiet. Locals relaxed a bit. They began to approach the new mysterious volcano, a crater with something that resembled boiling within it. People visited it like a new attraction. But then, just days later, the disaster struck again. At night, without warning, a new mountain went wild. A blast from the southern flank hurled scoria, chunks of jagged volcanic rock, into the air. This one was fatal for 24 people. The debris found afterwards was huge and coarse. For centuries after, the only signs of life from the Monte Nuovo were small fumaroles, jets of gas seeping from the earth. But then, even those faded away. Now it's just a lush green cone, a pretty sleeping giant. But the ground near Naples, Italy, is still alive. The Campi Flegrei sits quietly for now, but it might not be for long. It's showing signs it might be waking up again. This supervolcano looks like a hellish landscape, with its boiling mud pits, geysers, and steam vents. Romans and medieval Christians once believed it was a gateway to the underworld, and who can blame them? What's spooky is that recently scientists detected unusual activity under the surface. In 2012, Italian authorities raised the alert level on the volcano from green to yellow, meaning that it needs close monitoring. There are certain changes that usually happen before an eruption. The magma below starts releasing gases, which could weaken the rock above, eventually triggering a disaster. Unfortunately, no one can predict exactly when or if it will erupt. But if it does, the consequences could range from a minor inconvenience for locals to a global catastrophe. Its last tiny eruption happened in the 16th century, and it wasn't too bad. But if history repeats itself, like it was with Neanderthals, we're all cooked. An eruption like that could lead to global cooling, crop failures, and widespread famine. Right now, a group of scientists is trying to get a clearer picture of what's happening beneath the surface. The Campi Flegrei Deep Drilling Project is working to drill a 10,000-foot borehole, hoping to check out the magma chamber up close. But at least for now, the supervolcano remains quiet, and let's hope it stays that way. The protective shield of our planet decays and eventually fails. So do our satellites. First, communication satellites in the highest orbits go down. Next, astronauts in low Earth orbit can no longer contact their mission control center. And finally, hazardous, relentless cosmic rays start bombarding everything on Earth, causing havoc and devastation. Are these the terrifying consequences of the planet's magnetic field reversal we're going to face? Right now, as you're watching this video, Earth's north magnetic pole is extremely out of whack. It's so serious that scientists will have to update the global magnetic field model released a mere 4 years ago. Does it all mean that the magnetic pole of our planet will flip soon? Well, be patient, we'll figure it out a bit later. You see, the magnetic pole is moving quite erratically from the Canadian Arctic towards Siberia, and these movements are very unpredictable. But it's normal for the pole to be moving. There are long-term records from London and Paris that prove that the North Magnetic Pole moves randomly around the rotational North Pole over periods of several hundred years. But the most astonishing thing about its movement is that it's speeding up. Around the mid-1990s, the magnetic pole unexpectedly accelerated from a bit over 9 miles to 34 miles a year. And recently, the pole crossed the international date line, moving toward the eastern hemisphere. The European Space Agency launched extremely accurate magnetic field satellites in 2013. Thanks to them, researchers have superb data they can use not only to make magnetic field maps, but also to update them every 6 to 12 months. That's how they were able to notice that the core field was weakening too. It might be a sign that the planet's magnetic field is about to flip. To understand this process better, we need to figure out how the core field works. Let's say we've got a bar magnet that runs through the center of our planet and has a north and a south pole. This magnet is incredibly strong, representing about 75% of the intensity of our planet's magnetic field at the surface. Our bar magnet is not only moving, but is also getting weaker, by about 7% every century. Admittedly, this bar isn't the perfect representation of the core field. It's more like electric currents generating Earth's magnetic field. Still, this model makes it easier to see what's happening to our planet now. The magnetic field of our planet plays an important role in protecting us from dangerous radiation and geomagnetic activity, which is the product of the interaction between the solar wind and Earth's magnetosphere. Earth's magnetic field also moves. Scientists have been studying and tracking the movement of the magnetic poles for hundreds of years. The historical motions of these poles indicates changes in the global geometry of the magnetic field of our planet, and they may point to the beginning of the field reversal too. That's what the flip between the north and south magnetic poles is sometimes called. You see, if the north magnetic pole moves a bit, it isn't a big deal. But a complete reversal might have a serious impact on the climate of our planet, as well as modern technology. Luckily, such flips don't happen overnight. The entire process stretches over thousands of years. Plus, even though the magnetic pole weakens during a pole reversal, it doesn't disappear completely. So those scary events from the beginning of the video aren't likely to happen to us. The magnetosphere will continue protecting the planet from cosmic rays and charged solar particles, even though there might be some amount of particulate radiation that will make it to Earth's surface. Magnetic fields are generated by moving electric charges. If some material allows these charges to easily move in it, it's called a conductor. Metal is a great conductor, and we often use it to transfer electric currents from one place to another. In this case, the electric current is negative charges called electrons moving through the metal. The current is what generates a magnetic field. Earth has a liquid iron core. In other words, there are layers and layers of conducting material inside our planet. Currents of charges are constantly moving through the core, and the liquid metal is also moving and circulating there, generating the magnetic field. This magnetic field, in turn, produces something resembling a bubble around the planet. It's called the magnetosphere, and it's located above the uppermost part of the atmosphere. This layer shields and deflects high-energy cosmic radiation, which otherwise would be extremely dangerous to people and other forms of life on Earth. The magnetosphere also interacts with the ionosphere, the layer of our planet's atmosphere containing loads of ions and free electrons and capable of reflecting radio waves. The interaction between these two layers and the magnetized solar winds is what scientists call space weather. The solar wind is normally mild, and there's no space weather whatsoever. But sometimes, the sun starts shedding gargantuan magnetized clouds of gas that can accelerate to incredible speeds. They're called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. They're ejected from the sun over the course of several hours. CMEs usually look like giant twisted ropes and can occur spontaneously. Their frequency varies according to the 11-year-long solar cycle. For example, at a solar minimum, you can observe one ejection per day, and when the sun is in its most active phase, there might be 3 CMAs per day. Coronal mass ejections disrupt the calm flow of the solar wind and cause serious disturbances that can damage stuff both in space near Earth, like satellites, and on the planet's surface. If coronal mass ejections make it to Earth, their interaction with the magnetosphere generates geomagnetic storms. Those can trigger auroras, happening when a stream of energized particles hits the atmosphere and lights up. And then there are also solar flares. They develop more rapidly and with much more energy than coronal mass ejections. Solar flares often occur soon after coronal mass ejections. The most powerful volcanic eruptions pale in comparison to solar flares that release 10 million times more energy. Within a few minutes, one solar flare can give out billions of tons of charged particles. Solar flares are also insanely hot, with temperatures reaching several million degrees Fahrenheit. Astronomers believe that such bursts of solar radiation happen when the sun's magnetic field gets twisted in some regions. At one moment, all the pent-up energy is released. The star sends out light and particles, mostly electrons and protons. Most solar flares last for minutes, but some continue for hours. A powerful solar storm can potentially cause a devastating global blackout on Earth. If not for the Earth's magnetosphere, the effects of the sun's activity would be much more devastating. Luckily, the magnetosphere deflects most of the solar material hurtling towards our planet from our star at a speed of over 1 million miles per hour. But even so, during space weather events, there's a lot of hazardous radiation near Earth. It can potentially harm astronauts and spacecraft. Plus, space weather can damage large conducting systems, for example, pipelines and power grids, by overloading currents running inside them. Scientists regularly map and track the overall orientation and shape of our planet's magnetic field. To do it, they use local measurements of the field's orientation and magnitude. That's why they've been able to conclude that the location of the North Magnetic Pole has moved by almost 600 miles since the first measurements were taken in 1831. The magnetic field of our planet reverses on a timescale varying between 100,000 to 1 million years. One can tell how often it happens by looking at volcanic rocks at the bottom of the ocean. They capture the orientation and strength of Earth's magnetic field at the time of their creation. So, dating those rocks gives us a good picture of how our planet's magnetic field has evolved over time. From a geological point of view, field reversals happen quite fast, but they are extremely slow from a human perspective. A complete reversal normally takes a couple of thousand years, but during this time, the orientation of the magnetosphere may shift, exposing more of Earth to cosmic radiation. Such events tend to change the concentration of ozone in the atmosphere. In any case, scientists can't say for sure when the next field reversal will happen, but they keep mapping and tracking the movement of our planet's magnetic north. By the way, the Earth isn't the only planet with a magnetic field. Gas giants, like Jupiter, also have a conducting metallic hydrogen layer that generates their magnetic fields. Jupiter's internal magnetic field prevents the solar wind from interacting directly with the planet's atmosphere.
We're flying past the planets of our solar system. We pass by Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Then we move through dark space beyond the edge of our world. We've reached our destination. It's the Oort cloud. It's a hypothetical region around the solar system that holds tons of asteroids and blocks of ice. It's likely to be where the largest comet in human history was born. And now, it's heading toward the sun. Bernard and Ellie Bernstein was discovered totally by accident during the Dark Energy Survey. Our telescopes were pointed at distant space. Their main goal was to learn more about how the universe was expanding. Astronomers also wanted to make a more detailed map of the observable universe. Scientists analyzed over 80,000 images and found a moving object. It was alarmingly close to our home planet. Its size was an impressive 62 miles. That's about the width of Lake Michigan. It was an already active comet with a long tail. Usually, comets get a tail when they come close to the sun. The heat from the star warms the comet's surface, and light materials, like ice, begin to evaporate. This forms a cloud of steam and dust that stretches far beyond the comet. But Bernardinelli Bernstein is too far away from the sun to start heating up. This means that its surface has a different composition. It might be solid carbon monoxide. This increases the luminosity of the comet. That's why it can be observed with telescopes on Earth. We can compare Bernardinelli Bernstein to the largest meteorite to ever fall on Earth. About 66 million years ago, our planet was hit by a meteorite about 6 miles wide. At that time, the blast wave from the collision went around Earth several times. Tsunami waves caused by the impact were taller than the largest skyscrapers, and the energy from the explosion set huge areas on fire. Almost all living creatures, including dinosaurs and ancient fish, ceased to exist. The meteorite left a crater 3 times the size of Manhattan. The place where it fell was rich in sulfur. This substance evaporated because of the abnormal heat and gathered into massive clouds. This caused acid rains that were falling on Earth for several more weeks. Our newly discovered comet is 10 times bigger. If it were flying toward Earth, you'd see it with the unaided eye long before the impact. It looked like a moving star in the night sky. A few days before the comet reached our planet, you'd see it even during the day. You'd be able to distinguish its long tail, too. When the comet entered the atmosphere, it produced a booming sound so loud you'd hear it on the other side of Earth. At this point, the comet would begin to heat up because of friction with the air. It'd start burning. Countless pieces of debris would break away from the main body of the meteorite and fall to Earth. As soon as Bernardinelli Bernstein touched the surface of the planet, we'd see a flash so bright it'd outshine the sun. In a fraction of a second, a colossal amount of energy would be converted into heat. This would create the most powerful explosion in the history of our planet. It'd literally rip out chunks of ground and throw them into the air. The blast wave would incinerate everything within a few hundred miles. It continued to spread in different directions, breaking and bending trees. At one point, it reached snow-capped mountains and trigger huge avalanches that would cover many villages. The blast wave would go around the planet, shattering glass and buildings on all continents. Tsunami waves would be so high they would cover entire coastal cities. The most powerful earthquake in history would break the ground and create deep cracks. After the impact, billions of tons of dust and ash would rise into the air. A giant black cloud would completely block the sun's rays. Earth would be plunged into darkness. All the debris in the air would start melting. They'd turn into liquid lava and fall back to the surface, causing even more damage. The ash and dust in the air would cover the sun for several more months. During this time, the temperature on Earth would drop by several degrees. Even if they were hiding in deep shelters and bunkers, people, as well as all other living organisms on the planet, would be unlikely to survive this event. Fortunately, Bernardinelli Bernstein isn't going to approach Earth. Right now, the comet is about 20 astronomical units away from the Sun. That's 20 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. It means the comet will soon cross the orbit of Uranus. In 2031, it'll be 11 astronomical units away from our star. That's just outside Saturn's orbit. This is going to be the closest Bernardinelli Bernstein will approach the Sun. Then it will begin its flight back to the edge of the solar system. But the comet is bound to return again. It'll move away from the Sun and slow down until the star's gravity pulls it back. Then the comet will make another circle around our solar system. But that will take about 3 million years. Right now, we have other meteorites to worry about. For example, 3200 Phaethon. It crosses the orbits of Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Then it goes around the Sun and comes back. This cycle takes about 523 days. Then it starts over again. This meteorite is considered potentially hazardous because it crosses Earth's orbit at 7.5 Earth-Moon distances. During one of its last approaches to Earth, this 3.6-mile wide block of rock showered our planet with small meteors. Since the asteroid often passes by the sun, its surface is most likely to look like the dry bottom of a mud swamp. It's covered in scales and cracks. As it flies past Earth, these scales break off and cause meteor showers. But the largest, potentially hazardous asteroid is the 1999 JM8. It's about the size of 77 soccer fields. It passes by Earth at 9 lunar distances. Its closest approach to our planet will happen in August 2137. If such a meteorite were to hit Earth, an entire continent could be wiped out. The rest of the world would experience massive tsunamis, but would survive the event. So naturally, scientists are thinking of ways to protect the planet from such a disaster. The first solution is a controlled Big Bang. One of the laws of physics says that if you apply some force in one direction, it'll cause a reaction in the opposite direction. So if we spot an asteroid that is about to collide with Earth, we'll need to send a rocket toward it. This way, we'll produce a controlled explosion, not inside, but right above its surface. The blast will be directed upward, and the asteroid will shift downward. Even this tiny shift would be enough to change the trajectory of the asteroid, and then it'll fly past Earth. Another way is to send a heavy object, like a spaceship, toward the space body. Every heavy object has its own gravity, so the spacecraft will have to fly close to the asteroid, which will attract the ship to its surface, but the engines of the spacecraft will resist. The ship will start pulling the asteroid in the opposite direction. This will change the trajectory of the asteroid, and our planet will remain intact. We can also ram the asteroid with the spaceship. Bam! Or we could build a space station, like the ISS. It would be equipped with a bunch of huge magnifying lenses. We would send the station closer to the sun and start looking for potentially hazardous asteroids. Then, we'd point all the lenses so that the sun's rays would focus on the giant rock. The heat would begin to vaporize the matter from the asteroid's surface. That's where physics would come into play again. The matter would evaporate upward, and the asteroid would move downward. We could also wrap the asteroid in a reflective film, something like foil. Usually, space bodies absorb most of the sun's rays, but if the asteroid was covered in foil, the rays would bounce off its surface. This would create a weak pushing force. That should be enough to avoid the collision. Of course, we could attach rocket engines to the asteroid. This way, we would be able to not only change its trajectory, but also control it. But that would depend on the size of the asteroid and the number of engines. And then, we could use this massive rock to ram it into other, larger asteroids.
Arcturus, a huge red star. It's just bursting from inside out. The red sea of plasma on its surface rages and pulsates. The star burns anything that comes close to it. And now, flop! Arcturus is gone. But at the same moment, it reappears at the center of our solar system, replacing the sun. What we see in the sky isn't a small yellow dot anymore, but a giant red ball. It's 25 times wider and 30% heavier than the sun. Even though Arcturus is a little cooler, it's still a total nightmare for Earth. The distance from our planet to the star is now 25 times less. All the water in the oceans and rivers begins to evaporate. What used to be rainforests are quickly turning into a lifeless desert. But sunsets and sunrises now look amazing. Imagine yourself on the roof of the Empire State Building, watching the sunrise. First, you see the light over the horizon. It almost blinds you because Arcturus is 110 times brighter than the sun. Then, the star gradually climbs over the surface. The thick dot on the horizon gets wider and wider. It continues to grow until the red star is everything you can see. Arcturus is now so close that you can even see storms of hot plasma on its surface. There are periodic outbursts and mass ejections. Huge amounts of matter are ejected from the surface of the star at speeds of up to 1,200 miles per second. The matter takes the form of a loop attached to the star at both ends. And you have to wear a super advanced spacesuit to be able to observe such a sunrise. Life on Earth ceased to exist long ago under these conditions, and it's going to get worse over time because every 8 days, Arcturus's brilliance increases, and soon our planet will become more like Venus, It's so close to the sun that the high temperature makes any life there impossible. Okay, let's let our planet cool down a bit and put Proxima Centauri in the center of our solar system. It's not a red giant, but a red dwarf. This star is almost 7 times smaller than the sun and almost 9 times lighter. Now our oceans and rivers are not evaporating, but freezing over. Forests and jungles are covered with snow. In about a week, there won't be a single place on Earth where the temperature is above freezing. Even plants that are used to the cold will cease to exist. They mostly feed on the sun's energy. Now, they begin to starve. But there will still be water deep beneath the ice layer. It'll be heated by the hot core of our planet. Microorganisms will still be able to survive. It's much darker on Earth too. It's like an endless twilight here. Oh, and we can barely see the moon. The thing is, it doesn't produce its own light, but reflects it from the bright sun. With Proxima Centauri instead, the moon will lose its brightness.
Hop on the bright side of life together with our brand new tees, hoodies, and more. Click the link to pick your choice.
But an even bigger problem would be with our orbit. The sun has a certain gravitational force, and it keeps us just in the sweet habitable zone, where we're not too hot and not too cold. Proxima Centauri's gravity is much weaker, and Earth is slowly drifting away from the star. We now run the risk of encountering asteroids flying through space, or even other planets. But the worst case scenario is if Proxima Centauri simply can't hold our planet, and we fly away into dark space. Then, you can forget about any forms of life here. Now, let's put Sirius at the center of our solar system. It's the brightest star in our night sky. It's only 70% bigger than the sun, but almost twice as hot. So its glow is not only bright, it's sizzling. And its light is not yellow, but somewhere between blue and white. You couldn't go out in the city without sunglasses, or Sirius glasses. Still, you wouldn't want to walk the streets, where the asphalt is boiling anyway. You could literally fry eggs on the curb. Of course, by this time, all life on Earth has long since disappeared. But it's not just because of the temperature. Sirius emits enormous amounts of radiation. Our atmosphere serves as a shield against the sun, but in the case of Sirius, that shield wouldn't be enough. Now, why don't we take a more bizarre approach and make ourselves a double star system? These are 2 stars that revolve around a common center. And there's our Earth, safe and sound. It's all about the size and brightness of the stars. These 2 aren't too big, and they give off as much light as our sun. All that matters to us is that our planet is in the safe zone of the double star system. At sunrise, you first see one star appear from below the horizon, and then, a couple of minutes later, the other. The only problem is that this beauty may soon explode with enormous force. In binary systems, one star is always heavier than its companion. Sooner or later, it starts pulling matter away from the smaller star. Gradually, the bigger star just eats its neighbor. Then the big brother can reach a critical mass and explode. This explosion would be about as strong as a supernova. It would destroy our entire solar system. The light from this explosion would be visible for hundreds of light years away. And after that, there would be a huge nebula in the place of our star system. It's stardust and particles that are left from our world. Going to the realm of the crazy now, a black hole. Yes, there's one at the center of our solar system now. We know black holes are scary, mysterious objects that pull in everything in their path. But even around a black hole, there is a habitable zone. You just have to be far enough away so that it doesn't drag you down into its black abyss. Mercury and Venus would be too close to the black hole, so most likely they'd be torn apart and then head for the event horizon. This is the last stop before hitting the singularity, the heart of the black hole. There are only 2 problems, light and time. A black hole pulls light in instead of emitting it, so the Earth will quickly become dark and cold. And time goes slower around heavy objects. Near a black hole, 1 second can be equal to weeks or even months away in outer space. We won't feel this difference, but the entire universe around us will develop faster relative to us. Any object can become a black hole if it's compressed to a certain size. For example, the Sun can become one if it's shrunk to a width of 3.7 miles. And even the Earth, if you squeeze it to a width of 0.7 inches, it becomes a black hole. Oh, now there's some little rock lurking in the center of our solar system. It's a neutron star. It's about 18 miles wide. Some meteorites are much bigger than that, but it has a mass comparable to the Sun. So its gravitational force is about the same, and our planet's orbit is intact. But the problem is that neutron stars emit next to no visible light, so it's now permanent night on Earth. Still, it gets very hot here. When a neutron star is born, it can be several times hotter than the Sun at first, but it quickly cools down to the temperature we're used to. So there's a chance that all life on Earth hasn't yet been scorched. Another problem is that these little guys are rapidly spinning and can become pulsars. It's kind of like a powerful spotlight on two sides of a spinning star. Neutron stars also eject radiation at tremendous speeds. These rays will make our planet literally sterile. No life form would be able to exist under these conditions. And now, it's time for the biggest star ever known, Stephenson 218. This red giant is 2,150 times larger than the Sun, and if we place it at the center of our solar system, its edge will lie on Saturn's orbit. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter are already swallowed by the huge star. Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are roasting like chestnuts on a fire and will soon evaporate. In fact, this could happen to our Sun as well. The older it gets, the redder and bigger it becomes. It'll eventually run out of its fuel, hydrogen, and the Sun will start to burn heavier elements in its core. This will cause it to expand. Then we'll see more beautiful sunsets and sunrises, but the temperature will become too high. In theory, the Sun will get so big that it'll swallow the Earth, and then it'll explode in a supernova, leaving nothing of our entire solar system behind. Shiny.
Electronic satellites suddenly go out of control. There are voltage surges across the globe. In some places, there's a complete blackout. Scientists have little data on this incredible solar behavior, so we're still unable to accurately predict how or when exactly the next geomagnetic storm will happen. One such event took place back in July 2012, but thankfully it missed us. Not by far, though, by a mere 9 days. Just to give you a glimpse of what nearly happened, I need to explain some astronomical basics. A solar storm is a series of effects we feel here on Earth after certain events occur on the Sun. Our star is nothing more than a huge ball of molten gases that are constantly moving around, so these events happen more often than you'd think. For a solar storm to begin, our Sun needs to emit bursts of energy. They're in the form of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. These two phenomena send electrical charges and waves of magnetic fields toward the Earth at an astonishing speed of about 3 million miles per hour. When these solar storms reach our planet, we can see northern lights display in locations close to the Arctic Circle. But they can also mess up satellites or other types of electronic communications. Some of these solar storms can be dangerous, and back in 2012, we came close to experiencing a very powerful one that could have had a serious outcome. The most powerful in as much as 150-plus years, based on research done by astronomers. But how did we manage to escape it? Did we have something to do with it, or was it just a pure coincidence? What we do know is that one of those coronal mass ejections did hit the Earth's orbit in late July 2012. Our planet had already left that specific location as it was on its scheduled trajectory around the Sun. So you might be asking yourself at this point, what if it didn't miss us? Turns out these intense solar storms are dangerous to all sorts of technological objects. Given we are now literally surrounded by electric objects, from our phones to our cars, Try to imagine what would happen if they all stopped working all of a sudden. And here's how they work. Solar storms start with an explosion, or a solar flare. Then X-rays and UV radiation travel to our Earth at the speed of light. Some of the side effects? Well, they can include radio blackouts and GPS navigation errors. The effects can continue as minutes, or at times hours later, energetic particles reach our atmosphere. They move only a bit slower than the speed of light, but they can electrically shock the Earth's satellites and damage their components. Lastly, about a day later, clouds of magnetized plasma reach us as well. They can cause huge power blackouts, more or less paralyzing everything with an electrical plug. We might not even be able to flush our toilets, since most water supplies in cities use electric pumps these days. The effects of these geomagnetic storms would be different around the world, though. Solar storms are curious by themselves, but why do they affect some locations on Earth more than others? Based on recent research, geology has a lot to do with it. But I need to take you back a bit to paint you the bigger picture. Buckle up, because we're taking a trip in the time machine to a time when the moon didn't even exist yet. 4.6 billion years ago, our solar system looked a lot different than it does now, and that's putting it lightly. Hundreds of new planets began to form around the new sun. Planets like our own Earth, Venus, or Mars were still hurtling around the cosmos. Back in the 1970s, an astronomer named Donald R. Davis developed a theory that said the moon was born when another planet hit a newly formed Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. He also indicated that it might have been the size of Mars and later named this planet Theia. It's difficult to imagine what that impact might have looked like, even with the equipment we have these days. The astronomers suggested the giant impact hypothesis, trying to piece together this mystery. After running into our planet, the outer rocky layers of both Earth and Theia were projected into a circle of cosmic matter. Out of this debris, what we now know as the Moon was born. The Earth's core has apparently consumed Theia's iron core, that is, if it had any. Our planet also got into the position it occupies today. This way, it became more susceptible to geomagnetic storms. Back then, there was little to no information as to what might have happened to Theia, apart from giving us our only natural satellite. It took several years for a series of scientists to come up with an exciting new idea that revolutionized what we knew about our planet. What was left out of Theia is hiding under two continent-sized layers of rock deep within our planet. This theory is also one of the only explanations for why the moon is so dry and doesn't have much of an iron core. But why is geology so important when it comes to geomagnetic storms? Well, that's because recent data revealed that the type of rocks below your feet can affect how well your city adapts after powerful geomagnetic storms. Some types of rock, like sedimentary rocks for example, generally have more space filled with water, which makes them electrically conductive. Other types of rocks are denser and have more resistance when it comes to electricity. Whenever such a storm happens, people living in the New England Highlands may have a higher risk of experiencing major disruptions. At the same time, those in the mid-Atlantic coastal plain have less to worry about, simply due to what's hidden beneath their cities. How did we know how scary these storms are? Well, this wasn't the first time it happened. Solar storms have dazzled the astronomer community for many years now. The most iconic event of this magnitude was the Carrington event, which happened way back in September 1859. It gave us a sneak peek of what the power of the sun is, to say the least. They named it after an English astronomer, Richard Carrington, who witnessed the solar flares himself. The power of that solar storm was something humans had never experienced before. The strong geomagnetic storm caused northern lights as far down south as the territory of Hawaii. On the morning of September 1, 1859, Richard Carrington made his way into his private observatory, located outside of London. He opened the observatory dome to have a complete view of the sky and directed his telescope to the location of the sun. He saw a bunch of huge dark spots that gleamed on the surface of our star. Shortly enough, Carrington noticed two enigmatic areas, intensely bright and full of white light bursting out from the sunspots. They disappeared 5 minutes later, but the effects carried on all across the Earth's surface. At first, later in the night, telegraph communications all around the world started to malfunction. Flashes of light started to burst from telegraph machines, disturbing the operators and even setting papers on fire. Brightly colored auroras started to appear in the nighttime skies all over the world, making confused birds chirp at night. Some people even began their daily activities, since they mistakenly thought the day had already begun. These days, our planet is laced with a mega information web, so the impact of such a solar storm would be even messier. Back in the 1800s, the telegraph system was just starting out, but this Victorian internet was an important way of sending news and private messages. Even in the United States, telegraph operators had noticed local interruptions because of thunderstorms and northern lights before. But the Carrington event and its effects were something they had never seen before. A lot of telegraph lines in North America became useless. One telegraph manager based in Pittsburgh even recalled that the currents flowing through the wires were so strong their platinum contacts were in danger of melting. Another example was that of a telegraph operator located in Washington, D.C., named Frederick W. Royce, who was hurt as his forehead touched a ground wire. Samples taken from the Earth's icy locations tell us that the Carrington effect was twice as big as any other solar storm experienced in the last 500 years. It's very difficult to imagine what the impact of a storm of that magnitude might be today. But based on a 2008 report drafted by the National Academy of Sciences, it might cost us between $1 trillion and $2 trillion in damages. There are things we can do individually to help reduce the amount of damage, though, like buying a generator or installing a backup energy supply. This can be either a solar panel or a wind turbine. More so, we can equip our houses with surge protectors that connect to our electrical panels and can save us from lightning and other power surges. The simplest solution of them all? Just unplug all the devices you're not using at any particular moment. If they aren't connected to a power source, they can't be affected by any surges.
If you're a fan of Dr. Pimple Popper, you're probably freaking out right now, itching to squeeze out every little blackhead from those lip contours. But this is actually a hill formation that you can find in Garb, Sudan. Knowing that perhaps makes it all the more creepy because it looks like the crack in the middle is swallowing up everything around it. This black hole scenario brings to mind our next stop, Vostok Island. This eerie spot is a 59-acre coral atoll situated in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, about 400 miles northwest of Tahiti. If you check it out on Google Earth today, it looks like it's been totally blacked out, sparking all sorts of wild theories. People keep saying that this place is some top-secret base, or even a fictional island straight out of Lost. But what we see here is actually just a dense, dark green forest made up of Pisonia trees. Since nobody lives there and hardly anyone ever visits, the island is pretty much untouched by humans. This massive star, or mandala, is situated just outside Beatty, Nevada. It has got the internet all puzzled, with people trying to figure out if it's evidence of some kind of extraterrestrial activity. To add to the mystery, this spot is right by the Tonopah Test Range, which is also known as the famous Area 52. Despite its creepiness, it's probably just one of the thousands of crop circles that gained fame after Google Earth came along. This spiral formation right here is also located in Nevada, and it definitely looks like another chilling crop circle. But things get even stranger if you use the street view option. As you zoom in closer and closer, you'll notice that it's made up of carefully arranged rocks. This labyrinth, so to speak, is part of an open-air museum situated in the ghost town of Rhyolite. And if that's not creepy enough, take a look around and you'll see dozens of eerie men in white cloaks. Despite their lifelike appearance, these silhouettes are actually statues from an installation created by a Belgian artist in the 80s. Even stranger than stumbling upon a large circle on the ground is finding a bunch of them. Our next location in Wyoming is filled with peculiar circle structures to the point where it's hard to count them all. During the 20th century, this U.S. state shifted from a farming economy to an industrial one, dominated by the extraction of oil, gas, and coal. So, these circles are likely remnants of a tank farm. I mean, places where oil storage tanks used to be located. If you want to avoid nightmares, I highly recommend not searching for the mausoleum of Emil Becker in Poland. If you happen to find it by using the Street View mode, prepare yourself to face an abandoned place with the most terrifying sculpture there is. Oh, the creeps. Keeping on the spooky side, let's head to an isolated corner of Kazakhstan, where you can find a pentagram etched into the Earth's surface. This formation is huge, measuring roughly 1,200 feet in diameter. Before you jump to conclusions about this formation being related to some kind of underworld deity worship, it's worth noting that the pentagram actually turns out to be the outline of a park designed in the shape of a star. The star shape is marked by roadways, which are now lined with trees, making the star shape even more distinct in aerial photos. You can spot this peculiar symbol from quite a distance. At first glance, it might even resemble an otherworldly alphabet, as if a highly intelligent civilization is trying to send us an alert message. But this mystery is already solved. We are in De Hoge Veluwe, a Dutch national park located in the province of Gelderland. And these lines are actually part of the park's logo. Search for these coordinates to find what looks like a land formation straight out of an extraterrestrial landscape, or perhaps a set from Avatar. This place, located in Inner Mongolia, China, is believed to be a granite mine. But it's a bit of a mystery why it has such a striking blue tone on Google Earth. If you check it out on Microsoft Bing Maps, for example, the same location appears in a much more natural tone. In the Australian outback lies a massive geoglyph known as the Maori Man. Discovered in the late 90s, it appears to represent an indigenous Australian man hunting with a boomerang or stick. The figure stretches for more than 2 miles in length and about 1.6 miles wide. It has deep furrows carved into the ground, which adds to the complexity of its formation and origin. Despite efforts to uncover its purpose, its origin is still a mystery. This is Desert Breath, located in the Sahara. Like many things you have seen in this video, this formation also sparks speculation about it being created by extraterrestrial beings. But a quick Google search clears up that mystery. It turns out this is an art installation created by a group of 3 Greek artists back in 1997. They went all out, moving around a whopping 280,000 square feet of sand and even creating a large pool in the middle of it. Egypt still holds many mysteries, and you can explore them yourself with Google Earth. That's how some people stumbled upon this striking triangular-shaped plateau and immediately jumped to the conclusion that they discovered a hidden pyramid. However, experts quickly dashed their hopes. They believe there's no plausible explanation for a pyramid to exist in this area, located 8 miles west of the Nile Valley edge in Upper Egypt. This discovery is likely nothing more than a hill that has suffered the effects of erosion, combined with a heavy dose of wishful thinking. In some cases, nature itself is responsible for creating frightening sculptures, like the Badlands Guardian in Alberta, Canada. If you look at it from above, you'll notice not 1, but 2 human heads emerging from the landscape. These gigantic beings were sculpted by rainwater erosion on layers of clay-rich soil. Ironically, additional human-made structures give the impression that this one is wearing wired headphones. It seems that deserts are a prime spot for discovering strange images on Google Earth. So our next stop is China. In the Gobi Desert, you'll come across zigzagging white lines that look kind of random. The first challenge for armchair experts was figuring out what these structures were made of, as it's hard to tell if they're painted on or dug into the landscape. There's still a lot of speculation about it on the internet. But the most plausible explanation is that this structure is used for calibrating satellites. This way, satellite cameras can focus on these large grids to orient themselves in space. Check out this intact plane that seems to have sunk beneath the ocean off the coast of Crooked Island, Bahamas. Some viral videos claim it's a crashed plane belonging to the infamous Pablo Escobar. The truth is that something lying on the bottom of the ocean can't be that visible, so it's more likely that it's a plane that was actually flying when Google captured these images. However, there is a strong belief that Pablo Escobar did have a plane that crashed nearby, but it was in another part of the Bahamas known as Norman's Cay. You can still spot it in shallow turquoise waters. Just search for Norman's Cay sunken plane, and there it is. If you're convinced that extraterrestrials are already among us, then go ahead and type in these coordinates on Google Earth. Explore the area using Street View, and wow, what is it? Of course, we're not talking about visitors from other planets, but this shadow of a gigantic creature still gives me the creeps. Turns out, it's just a person lugging around one of those 360-degree Street View cameras tucked away in a trekker backpack. So hey, if you take a good look around Google Earth, you might stumble upon more of these elongated necked beings walking around the globe. Nature can ruin your life with a tsunami, hurricane, tornado, rainstorm, and many other destructive events. But did you know that it also has other, weirder ways to destroy? Let's take a look at the most unusual natural phenomena. How about the orange rain? It's not that orange drops are falling on you. No, the whole sky and the atmosphere are turning dark orange. Orange clouds are pouring dirty orange drops on you. Don't worry, they're not poisonous, but watch your eyes. Don't let the drops get in because they contain sand particles. If you want to see this unusual phenomenon, go to the Canary Islands. Every year, the sky turns orange there and pours orange-red drops of water mixed with sand onto the ground. This phenomenon happens because of the Sahara. In the desert, strong winds blow millions of tons of dust and sand into the air. All this mess penetrates the atmosphere and turns the sky orange. Then, the particles from the Sahara fly toward the Canary Islands and fall on people in the form of heavy rain. Residents of this region experience breathing problems and poor vision in the orange conditions. Airports stop working. All flights are canceled. Under favorable conditions, a storm that carries sand particles can reach both the Mediterranean and Northern Europe. Therefore, if you suddenly see red rain, don't be scared. This is not the apocalypse. Warning, this kind of rain causes anxiety. During this phenomenon, you won't see drops of water. There will be spiders falling from the sky. People have faced spider rains in Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. These creatures are called money spiders, or sheet web weavers. During strong winds, they climb as high as possible to the tops of plants, bushes, and fences. Then, they release a parachute-shaped web, and the wind blows them into the sky. They fly high into the air, meeting birds, cold winds, and harsh weather. Not everyone can survive this journey. Then, when the weather calms down, this tiny party lands on the ground. No one knows why spiders behave this way. According to one version, they fly away from places where flooding can begin. In other words, it's a forced migration. And because of this migration, spiders often become the first settlers of territories that have been destroyed by fires or other natural phenomena. But don't worry, these creatures are harmless to humans. They just want to live and multiply. Although, to be honest, it's hard to stay calm when thousands of arthropods are falling on your head. Tornadoes are a destructive force. But look at this. A whirlwind appears during a snowstorm. It's sucking in more and more snow. Now, it's not just a tornado, but a snow-nado. It looks like something terrible and destructive, but don't worry, it's not as scary as it seems. This is a fairly rare disaster that has recently occurred in Utah. The snow tornado came across a man and his dog on its way. It looked impressive and dangerous. Fortunately, no one got hurt. This phenomenon occurs when an air vortex raises snow from the ground. If you see a similar vortex next to you, don't panic. Usually such phenomena are harmless and don't have enough force to destroy things. This natural phenomenon is much more dangerous than the snow-nado. Just imagine that a mountain of chunks of ice is moving along roads, sweeping away everything in its path. It looks like a tsunami, but instead of water, there are ice boulders. The ice tsunami can destroy houses, cars, and trees. It can move on grass, asphalt, and sand. It can jump out of the water like a crazy salmon. Fortunately, the ice tsunami is not a frequent phenomenon. It occurs when three conditions are met: a flat coast, loose ice, and strong wind. Waves and wind are throwing broken pieces of ice onto the shore. These ice flows accumulate into a huge wall, and then, during strong winds, this ice monster begins to move. Therefore, if you see a large pile of ice near the water, move away from this place as far as possible. And we're back to the tornado again. You already know about snow tornadoes. You've probably seen the footage of tornadoes in a desert when the wind blows sand into the air in documentaries. Tornadoes pass over the ocean's surface and can create a funnel inside the water. But there's a phenomenon that's even cooler and more impressive. It's a fire tornado. Surely not many of you have heard about this thing. It's a very dangerous phenomenon, but people have ventured close to the fiery tornado to study it. But firefighters, by the way, often encounter this devastating phenomenon. A fire tornado forms during forest fires, and sometimes it can appear inside a burning building. If you see a big flame and feel a strong wind, be careful. A fiery funnel may form. But how does this happen? Let's first look at the origin of an ordinary tornado. So, we're somewhere in a dry place in the middle of a hot day. The sun heats the air that is close to the ground. Its lower layers absorb more energy than the upper ones. An increase in temperature makes this air less dense and more buoyant. Then it lifts into the sky in the form of long columns. This rise has a spiral movement. The water in your bathtub moves similarly when it flows through the drain hole. So many of these air vortices are quite weak, and you can't see them. But some of them encounter strong air currents. This accelerates their movement, adds energy, and increases the area. More and more air gets into this vortex, making it stronger. When dust and sand get into these whirlwinds, you see a tornado. The fire tornado follows the same pattern, with only one difference. The air below is heated, not by the sun, but by fire. Fire heats the air, it rises, rotates, and pulls the fire inside. Some of the vortices can reach up to 400 feet high and 50 feet wide. It's like a thin, leaning tower of Pisa, made of fire, only twice as tall. This is a truly devastating and terrifying phenomenon. The ground is shaking. Flocks of birds are flying away. You can hear a loud, low rumble. The volcano spits out a giant ash cloud. Lava is flowing from the mouth of the fiery mountain. Rivers of fire are running down and dashing towards you. You have nowhere to escape. The fire is getting closer and closer and… Wait a minute. This lava isn't hot. It's cold. How is that possible? You can observe cold lava flows near many volcanoes. In Indonesia, for example, this phenomenon has recently destroyed entire villages. Yes, it's not hot, but it's still dangerous. Cold lava streams occur when hot lava mixes with ash, sand, and pebbles during wet weather. In a sense, the volcano spews out streams of heavy mud. It covers roads, houses, cars, and trees. Cold lava flows are a destructive phenomenon, so stay away from them. Even if some volcano is very beautiful and you want to take cool photos, don't take any chances. Okay, let's relax a little and end our video with something fun. How about surfing? But instead of ordinary waves, we have icy ones. This phenomenon is called the ice wave. It looks as if someone paused a wave while it was forming before it hit the water. It's a rare occurrence, but you can find it on Mount Washington. The top of the mountain is shrouded in fog most of the year. Cold temperatures, humidity, and winds form frost. Then strong winds force this frost sideways, and thus a wavy shape forms. And when there's a wave, you can ski or snowboard inside, like a surfboard. But be careful, it's pretty cold in there, so wear warm clothes.